Welcome back to Questing on the Road, where we're going to continue our series on how to Merctech. This will be episode 2. We're going to look over the options for campaign and or career setup. They're very similar. So let's get on into it. So let's go into... Well, first I want to go into single player. We're going to do a new career. Campaign does work. Now, one thing you'll find out is
the FedCom alliance was formed.
There's a lot more audio in red text in this mod. He's gone through, like, I think most missions, all these things, they have like an audio. Just in this case, it just reads this off for you. I like that. I don't, I can read fine, but it's kind of nice to be able to look at something else and be listening to that. And of course, it's not super hard here. But you have all your standard starting options, and you also have a few custom ones. Now you have a random one. That one sounds interesting. You can do a tank career. This is one thing you can do. Is you can play as tanks. You can buy them, you can sign them other people, or you can play them yourselves. They tend to be cheaper than mechs, as far as I can tell. Now, as we, the few missions we have, you notice they haven't been there. I guess they've not been populating correctly on the mech market, which is where you'd find them. But this is an option. You can actually start, and from the very bare bones, I'm a tanker. Here's all your tanks. Scorpions. Start with the Manticore. Manticore is pretty awesome. J. Edgars, these are light ones, but it's always an option. And then I'm not sure what Team Venom is.
The good news is that you can keep your mech and any money we have in the bank. You're going to have to run this show for yourself now. Let other people worry about patriotism. You just keep your mind on...
This kind of looks like a... This is probably a start that's from one of the other games. Because you're only starting with one mech, a commando. Not a bad looking commando. SRM-6, three medium lasers. It's going to have light armor. It might be kind of cool. You just you against the world, and you build up your empire from the start. That's kind of cool. This random start intrigues me. Just a bunch of random mechs. Okay, let's go ahead and start here. This is where I wanted to kind of look. You have some presets here. Mech Warrior 5, Easy, Tabletop, Merctech, Hurt Me Daddy. I'm going to select Merctech, but we're going to look over these because this is going to give us also an additional, especially when it comes to the simulation, how things work. Iron Man mode, one save, that's pretty standard. Enforce balance. So mechs must maintain weight in their locations. Because if it isn't, you get unbalanced. You're going to have penalties. I think they're mostly mobility and also stability type penalties. But you can't, for instance, take a PPC off of your arm, put a small laser there, and then just put a bigger engine in, because all of a sudden your entire mech is going to be tilting to the the one side or the other. You can do it. I mean, it's not. I guess I shouldn't say you can't do it, or you probably situationally you might need to, but with this, it further restricts based on tabletop how you do this, how you change out your mech. Weapon convergence. Okay. So weapons that don't have gimbals, you will have to actually have a convergence point. And a convergence point, I mean, it says there, but it's kind of a point you select where you want all of your weapons to, if you fire them, at that distance is where they will intersect. So that's what this is talking about with weapon convergence. And apparently this is a setting you can do in the grouping menu. Shielding skills. Okay, now all of these. I'm not sure why you'd want to turn that off. What is this? Weird. One of the skills for pilots in the game is shielding. And what shielding does, the higher your shielding, the less damage you take from hits. It's a percentage based. It's one of the things that makes, especially for NPCs, a high skill NPC, because they're not super smart, but a highly skilled NPC can be pretty dangerous. So ramming, charging and death from above attacks are enabled in this game. Well, especially if you push this button. Friendly fire. It's kind of self-explanatory, but it also refers to splash attacks. You can hit your own mechs. They can hit you. Obviously the NPCs aren't aiming at you, but you could be getting in their way. Legging kills. Okay. In tabletop, destroying both legs of a mech doesn't kill it. It's still there. It can still fire. It will be down. And odds are your pilot's probably going to want to eject after that. But because you're very vulnerable in that state. But it doesn't technically just completely destroy you. Now, obviously in Mech Warrior, they don't even have fall down. It's one of the reasons you destroy one leg, it's still there and they're still walking around, because you still, for a player, would need to be able to move around and do stuff. They haven't quite gotten to that extent in this mod. I know you can be knocked down, but I think the last time we even discussed this in the forum or the Discord, it's like, it's just way too much work to animate all that. Okay, fair enough. But in the tabletop, you can crawl around and whatnot. But obviously here, they've made it so where you can still fight. You just ain't going to go nowhere. I assume you aren't going to go nowhere. Like I said, they haven't enabled crawling. Anyway, limited inventory. I'm not sure how bad they leave the summits to, but in real, in real life. Well, yeah, I guess in real life too. You can't just store an infinite amount of stuff in like a semi truck. We have weight restrictions. We have to stay under in a semi truck. But in addition to that, even if you're having the lightest stuff ever, eventually you get cubed out. You just literally can't put more in that semi truck. Same would be true with the dropship. I'm going to leave that. It's defaulting to off, mostly probably because that is irritating to deal with. But if you're wanting a little extra added, a little bit of realism, that's obviously a thing you can do. It's probably in the Hurt Me Daddy section. But alternate hit point or hard points. Okay, it changes the PGI model to where instead of just having generic energy and ballistic and missile hard points, they change it into these other sections. You have point defense systems, you have direct fire, and then I assume probably missiles. New hard point system. Well, missiles probably just is unchanged, but they combine energy and ballistic into the same hard point, and add machine guns up into the direct fire point. But then small point defense, small lasers, pilot flamers, and so forth are in a point defense system. Which means if you have a mech, with this activated, and here obviously by default it is activated. Let's say the Warhammer 6R. Because one of the things I'll do with the Warhammer 6R is I'll take out the machine guns, I'll take out the ammo, and I'll take out the small lasers, and I'll put 2 medium lasers in those slots. Can't do that with this because those are now point defense slots. I like this change. One of my probably my biggest gripe with Mech Warrior Online, one of the things that irritated me the most was what I think it was the Boom Cat, what they called it. It was a K2. K2 is a catapult that instead of having missile launchers, it has 2 PPCs where the missile, instead of missile bay arms. And what people did, it also had 2 machine gun ports in the torso. What people would do is they remove the PPCs, remove the machine guns. I assume put in. I think it probably. I don't know how they reduced the weight further. I'd have to look at it. I know I built one, but they put 2 AC-20s in there, in the machine gun ports. It's like it makes no sense whatsoever. Yeah, I tend to be pretty. I like stock or close to stock builds. Something that's like a complete rebuild. It's not fun to me. It's one thing that kind of, well, I won't go into it. But here we can report destroyed engines. Now, this is a big deal. We've not run into it because we've not lost a mech yet. But finding engines are probably the most expensive component of a mech. You lose an engine, you can have the mech right there. You can't run it. The ability to repair those destroyed mechs, even at this kind of discount, is a really big deal. It means that your mech isn't going to be put permanently out of commission. Well, I mean that's the main benefit here. Also, you don't have to source a new engine. There's further things where in this mod you can only do certain kinds of repairs and customizations and replacements depending on the tech level of the location you're at and the industrial rating of the area you're at. Which we'll look at that here in a moment too. Double blind rules. Okay, that's not really what double blind does in the rules. But double blind in this game, if you have an active probe, normally you can see, hey, his armor's turning red, or it might be stripped completely. His structure's turning to different colors. Apparently, with the double blind rules on, you can't see that. You don't necessarily know. I assume visually you could see an arm is black, but because it's been burned, and pitted. But that's kind of hard to see, especially in the middle of the battle, or at least for me. But it would kind of be realistic. I mean, I say kind of. It would actually be really realistic. You don't know. You might know, I hit them in the arm. I might not know how bad. It may be burned, but it's just superficial damage. You don't know. So that would be added realism, but for the sake of gameplay, I think it's probably turned off here as default. Limited weapon gamble. To accurately. Looks the torso weapons to the torso direction and forces blended animation. There is sort of a rule like that in tabletop. In tabletop, if your motion gives you, if you're walking, you get a +1 to hit, or +1 to the difficulty of the hit. If you're running, it's a +2. I think it's right. It is. Wow, I can't believe I'm foggy on that. But so if you slow down to a walk speed, you would aim better. Now, arm-wise, apparently he's not penalizing that, but I think that's what this is trying to simulate. Is you need to slow down a little bit to walk, quote-unquote, walk speed, for your weapons to fire accurate. Otherwise, it seems like they're going to sway around a little bit, which is kind of cool, but also kind of annoying. You have different kinds of resource management. You have full and limited. All right, wanted to pop back in here and add a little bit of clarity, because it turns out the feature list does give us a little bit of that clarity. And honestly, this is take two, because even in my explanation of the clarity, I got confused. So it isn't as complicated as I was making it. First of all, ammo is tracked. So if you use 100 rounds of autocannon ammunition in a mission, you have to refill the ammo bin with suitable rounds. Ammo can be purchased by the ton in the market in any industrial zone. The option can be turned off or on when starting a new campaign. Armor is the same way, except just purchased in 5-ton lots. And it says, in here it says that can be salvaged. Ammo can also be salvaged. The resource delivery is specifically what this is talking about. Ammo and armor can be delivered to you if you have resource management set to limited. If you don't have the required amount of armor or ammo when you're putting in a work order, a time delay, they have to basically ship it in. Now, there is a mechanic like that regardless for certain components, which I don't know if they're going to address when they add in the workshop actual functionality completely. Because right now you can't buy like spare components, which is different than the equipment. So for example, a PPC has like a housing and an emitter and so forth. Those are the components I'm talking about, and those are things that will get damaged through the campaign, through general use, that you'll want to fix, and you might need to just outright replace it. But what this is referring to is if you set this particular option to limited, if you don't have enough ammo or armor, it will ship it in the same way with all those components. It does take time. It takes, it can take up like 10 days to get this stuff in, but you can do it. If you set this to full, then you can't do that. You have to have it with you, and if you don't have it with you, then you have to go get it. So that's what this is referring to here. I was overcomplicating it in my head when I was even doing the explanation. So let's head on back into the original video. Starting here, you go all the way from the Star League up to the Ilklon area. Now, as far as the mechs that are available and the equipment that's available, I think we're kind of like up to around here, 3057, 3062, which is kind of the Twilight of the Clans, FedCom Civil War era. And also, I think that, I don't want to say that there's clans. You know what, let's go ahead, we'll do, because we're going to activate this, we'll do a start. Let's see if the clans are actually on the map. Starting land step, I'm assuming this is because I picked a random start. I could start with the lands of heavy mechs, which sounds good to me. Okay, global health. So by default, everything is twice as tough as the warrior should be. But we do 100% of the damage. I mean, that's kind of like, if you put both of those up to 200%, you might as well leave them at 100% because it would be the exact same thing. So yeah, battles last longer because they have 200% health. Enemy damage modifier, 100%. Vehicle health modifier is 100%. So in this case, you could make vehicles tougher. I don't know why you'd want to do that separate from mechs. But you have the option. Component health per slot. So weapons that have more slots, I guess, are more durable. And can be knocked out a little bit easier or less. You know, the tooltip does say exactly what's going on here. Critical hits do so much damage. I'm not sure what that damage number is, and it probably depends on the weapon itself. But your weapons can take so much damage before it's knocked out of commission. Now, I do believe that even if it isn't knocked out, it still does take that damage and component damage that you then could have to replace or repair after the mission, because I know that's a mechanic. Ammo multiplier. It looks like by default he's giving us more in the Merctech preset than they even give you in MechWarrior 5. increase from this multiplier as well as the damage multiplier. So ammo just in this game does 300% more damage by default. Heat capacities, he gives us a little bit more heat capacity. Heat cooling. Is it set to point? When it comes to these ratios, I don't know. All I'm saying is you have the option of changing this. Weapon feedback chance. Weapons to damage itself. Weapons like a PPC with the safeties off. Yeah, that is. I remember that advanced rule. You can turn off. I forget what it's called. But one of the reason a PPC has a minimum range is this feedback, and there's a safety. So the reason you like if you try to fire within that minimum range and you quote unquote miss is because the safety kicked in and it didn't fire by lore. But you can turn that safety off, and then you fire it, and the weapon itself would actually like feed right back into it. It's basically like firing a lightning cannon, but you're kind of grounding yourself because you're so close. I didn't know I could turn off that safety though, but apparently you can. Through armor crit chances, through armor crits are a thing in tabletop. Artillery warning time. We've not done these kind of missions, but you'll see this in MechWarrior 5 as well. There'll be a little red indicator. Hey, an artillery shell is about to hit here. You might not want to be standing within this red circle. This is obviously giving you, ample time to get out of the way, or less time. Like if you wanted to go all the way, no channel, half a second, and then boom, you're done. Then here's where I was talking about the customization levels. So you have rating. Systems have ratings from A to F. At rating A, you can see here, we can change our armor type, armor distribution, and we can just straight up remove a weapon or equipment. No big deal. You can do that probably without it being in a mech bay. It's pretty much anywhere. B, I can change it. Now changing it, change or install. There is a difference between change and install, and I don't remember what it is. But changing your cooling system would be like your heat sinks. So if I wanted to go from double heat sinks to single heat sinks, and there's probably other kinds of heat sinks I'm not aware of, or at least not. Well, I know that there's laser heat sinks. There's all kinds. There's different cooling systems, but changing that base system apparently is pretty easy. Changing equipment and weapon. I mean, at its core, I would say, well, it's being able to change like my medium laser into a large laser, except I think that's what install means. I don't know. There's a difference there. Change might be I'm replacing my medium laser with another one, whereas install might be, I use the A rating to remove it, and now I'm using a C rating to install a entirely different kind of weapon. Installing case apparently requires so if you're wanting to completely rebuild your mech. Well, in the last episode, we did that Jenner. I removed the SRM4 launcher and the ammo, which would be equipment and weapon, which required I could do that easily, and I also changed the armor. So I could do that all from an A rating thing. It was no big deal. Now we ran into that bug, which has been fixed, by the way. That is apparently a known bug that they fixed in 8.4, where you go down to the planet and oh wait a minute, where's my mech? I said, well, cancel that. And I came back and it was fully restored. That bug has been fixed. Anyway, let's go down. Installing case, changing your gyro type, changing the engine type and rating. I don't, and here again, you're seeing a difference between refit and non-refit. this may also be if I'm changing the engine from like a 270 into an XL 270, that might be a refit. Or if I'm just replacing the engine, it was destroyed, so I'm replacing it. That would probably be a refit. Whereas if you're changing the actual rating, I don't know. That would require some clarity that I don't currently have. Command console's a cockpit. I don't know why that requires an E, but it's all the way up here. And then again, we were just talking about the changing engine types of ratings. Then changing the actual structure or triple strength Meyermer requires a really advanced, complete rebuild of the mech. So that probably requires F. Because you are, in MechWarrior Online, it's like, oh yeah, I like Endosteel because I like having less weight. What you're actually doing is completely changing the skeletal structure of the mech. So it probably takes quite a bit of time as well. Let's go move on to the next section here. Next. I'm not going to go super in depth into this, but you can change based on type of weapon how much DPS it does, how much heat it does. So if you really want to get in and customize, like, hey, I really like I want autocannons to be king. I'm going to make them high DPS, no heat, and you'll see in real time here the numbers changing. No spread and all the ammo. So what's this? Improved heavy gauze, infinite ammo. Does it always have infinite ammo? Unknown laser. Huh. Where's that improved heavy gauze at? It's gone. It only exists when you have infinite ammo, apparently. Let's change these back to default. Does this button change default? Oh, you can randomize it. Ooh. Is that what it did in the previous one, too? Is that randomized? That would be weird. Randomize all these numbers and don't know what it is. I guess that would make for an interesting interesting challenge. You don't know what your weapons are doing, what your... Okay, there we go. What's the Merctech changes? Oh, Merctech, he likes deep. I do remember that. Yeah, that was something that was in version 2. Autocannons did a lot more damage than normal. Gauze and laser settings are default. PPC looks like he increases the damage of PPC does by 200%, but also increases the heat. Missile settings, missiles do more damage. Machine guns are the same. Flamers, rifles. Rifles are... I've never really messed with rifles, especially in tabletop, because they're primitive weapons. They're basically inferior to autocannons in every way. They do less damage. They take up a lot of space. But one benefit a rifle does have is one of the problems of an autocannon is they're heavy for the damage they do. And usually they also take up a lot of slots. Rifles are lighter. They do less damage, but they're lighter, and they don't generally take as much space internally. But in this case, whatever default would normally be, I guess it has a worse spread. So that's how he's dealing with rifles. Melee, you could make melee really powerful, which I'm actually tempted to do, but I won't. I mean, this isn't a campaign we're going to keep anyway. Plasma, this is plasma can rifles I've never messed with either, but from what I understand, these are amazing weapons. They're kind of a combination of a PPC gauze or a PPC gauze rifle flamer or some random stuff like that. You can randomize the entire thing if you wanted to with this button. Okay, that's going to wrap up this episode. But before we leave, I do want to go over a few things that I didn't quite understand that is in the features list, and add a little bit more information about some of this stuff. First, we did talk a little bit about components, and let's hear in the weapon critical hits. With the addition of the Workbench, which they did add a workbench. We'll look at it a little bit in the next episode, but it isn't really fully featured yet in 0.82. But I think it is in the future. So that in mind, with the addition of the workbench, weapons now have parts that can be damaged in combat. Weapons can be knocked out of alignment, so a laser that was hitting the crosshairs may now hit below it instead. Your emitter may be damaged, which may cause the laser to generate more heat when fired to normal. Weapons that are damaged this way will show up as yellow in the mech lab. They can be repaired on the mech. Weapons are damaged by hits to the individual meshes on the outside. So I was a little bit, and I still don't know if you can just order these spare parts. As of right now, it's just automated. It doesn't matter if you're on limited or full resources. You can just order them in. So I'm thinking that particular system isn't quite in yet. This is why they're automating it. But eventually we might need to buy some spare parts, which is kind of cool. Keep spare parts in mind. And I also think that you're going to be able to take apart, each weapon. It has 4 components. One is the 3 components kind of depends on the kind. Like they mentioned here, an emitter and alignment and so forth. That will affect their degraded performance. There's also the mount itself. As long as the mount itself is not completely destroyed, you can reuse the weapon. You just have to replace the components. And I think the plan is for the components themselves to have quality markers as well. So, I could take apart a weapon at the workbench and put in a higher quality barrel, for instance, and it would increase its accuracy. I also think you can just take apart a weapon and then have components for repairs. I think that is the plan. Now moving on over here to overhauled missiles. Because we were kind of here, last page, we were kind of talking about some of the changes and ways you can customize how missiles and basically the damage heat characteristics. But here's a big change to missiles. Overhauled missiles. Missiles now individually track a target versus a group that flies together. With these changes, swarm ammo has become a reality. Each missile can target a random target within 180 meters of the primary target. If they miss their first target, they will go into pit bull mode and can target any target in front of it. Missiles have an acceleration and deceleration part of their life cycle. When first launched, the missiles are traveling at around 100 meters per second, but will quickly accelerate to their max velocity. During this time, they have their highest turn rate. Once they have reached max velocity, their motors will still burn and have good turn rates to track the target. Once the motor is out, their turn rates and velocity will begin to decrease while still tracking their target. So it kind of completely changes the behavior of the missiles, and also each individual, like an LRM-20, each one of those missiles is individually being calculated, which is insane. But cool. Then over here, the last couple changes here, autocannon changes. Single fire regular autocannons can now enter double fire mode, but they have a 20% chance of jamming and damaging the autocannon. Burst fire autocannons can now toggle between single burst and accelerated mode. Accelerated mode will fire twice the rounds as burst mode fire does in the same amount of time, but the chances of jamming are 20%. Projector spud is also increased in these 3 modes. New ammo including flak and armor piercing for all calibers. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next episode. New caseless autocannons have been added. They are lighter, less bulky, higher damage than regular autocannons, but they generate twice the heat and can be damaged by weapons on jamming. And can damage the weapon on jamming. Finally, missile launcher changes. Missile launchers will now fire their missiles at random intervals based off of the tier of the weapon. They will also only fire as many missiles as there are tubes before going into a quick reload in 0.5 seconds to fire the next salvo. LRMs can have their missiles hot loaded in the tubes, which if the LRM takes a critical hit, while the missiles are hot loaded, the weapons and ammo will explode. That's straight from tabletop. What that does in tabletop, it actually removes the minimum range. Normally you have a minimum range of 6 hexes, but if you hot load it, no minimum range. But if they hit your missile launcher, it will explode. LRMs that are not hot loaded take a high arc to the target, while hot loaded missiles are direct fire. That's pretty cool. And then they go into okay. So that takes care of all that. Next episode, we're going to get in and actually take a look at the mech lab. We're also, I think we're also just going to go ahead and do a quick mission. We're going to look at the contract system, which isn't as different as I was, I think, in version 2. There's been a revert or something, which may come back. I don't know. Or it may be a separate mod now. I just need to double check all that. But then we'll do a quick mission just to showcase some stuff. But until we go on to the next quest, be safe. Bye-bye.